The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Wellington Hotel's ballroom sparkled overhead as I sat at the furthest table from my family, exactly where they wanted me. My adoptive sister Jessica's wedding was in full swing with champagne flowing freely and guests dancing. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had no idea I owned, not just this hotel but the entire Wellington Hotel Group. 28 years of being the family's greatest mistake had taught me patience. I was found on the doorstep of St. Mary's Hospital wrapped in a thin blanket with nothing but a note saying please give him a better life. The Winters family, successful, prestigious, and desperate for good publicity, adopted me. Margaret and Robert Winters, along with their biological children Jessica and Michael, became my family. From day one, the message was clear. I was a charity case, their good deed to society. Mom never missed an opportunity to remind me how fortunate I was that they saved me. Dad barely acknowledged my existence unless it was to compare my achievements unfavorably to Michael's and my siblings. They treated me like the help. Remember when he thought he could join the family business? Michael had laughed earlier today during his wedding speech. Thank God Dad had the sense to make him start in the mailroom instead. What they didn't know was that I had turned that mailroom position into my greatest advantage. While delivering letters and packages, I learned every detail of how the company operated. I memorized client lists, studied contracts, and identified inefficiencies. At night, I built my own business empire. Starting with a small tech consulting firm, I secured contracts with their competitors. Every time they dismissed me as just the mail boy, I gained another client. When they mocked my tiny apartment, I was closing deals across Asia. While they laughed at my old Toyota, I was buying up commercial properties through shell companies. The Wellington Hotel Group was my crowning achievement, purchased 6 months ago through my holding company Harrison Enterprises. The Winters family had no idea that every time they hosted an event here they were putting money in my pocket. Sir? A waiter approached my table nervously. Mrs. Winters asked me to remind you about the bill. She says it needs to be settled before the end of the reception. I nodded, taking another sip of water. I hadn't touched the champagne. I wanted to be completely clear-headed for what was about to happen. My phone buzzed, a notification from my executive assistant. Transfer complete. You now own 51% of Winters Industries. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. For the past year I'd been quietly buying shares through various shell companies. Today, while they celebrated Jessica's wedding, I had finally gained controlling interest in the family company. James. Mom's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. She was approaching my table, her expensive dress rustling with each step. The bill needs to be settled now. We can't have any complications with the venue. I stood up slowly, straightening my custom-made suit. Not that they'd noticed it wasn't off the rack. Of course, Mom, we wouldn't want any complications. And please, she added with a grimace, don't make a scene. You know how Jessica feels about having you here. I remembered exactly how Jessica felt. Just last week, she tried to uninvite me, saying my presence would bring down the tone of the wedding. The only reason I was still invited was that uninviting an adopted child might hurt their precious public image. I think it's time we had a family meeting, I said calmly. Could you ask Dad, Michael, and Jessica to join us in the hotel owner's private dining room? I've arranged something special. Mom's eyes narrowed. James, this is your sister's wedding. Whatever issues you have, it's about the bill. I interrupted smoothly. And Winters Industries, trust me, they'll want to hear this. Curiosity won out over disdain, and soon I was leading my family into the luxurious private dining room. The wall-mounted TV was already displaying the evening's financial news. What's this about? Dad demanded. We have guests waiting. You always taught me the importance of paying debts, I said, removing an envelope from my jacket. So I wanted to handle this properly. I slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a complete record of my ownership of the Wellington Hotel Group, Harrison Enterprises, and most importantly, the newly acquired controlling interest in Winters Industries. What is this? Michael grabbed the papers, his face growing pale as he read. Let me make this simple, I said, my voice steady. I own this hotel. I own the venue you're celebrating in. And as of 10 minutes ago, I own controlling interest in Winters Industries. The silence was deafening. Jessica's perfectly made-up face had gone slack with shock. Mom's hands were trembling as she reached for the documents. "This is impossible," Dad whispered, but I could see in his eyes that he knew it was true. "The mailroom was an excellent education," I continued. "I learned everything about how the company worked, every weakness, every opportunity. While you were busy reminding me that I wasn't really family, I was building something of my own." "You can't do this," Michael started, but I cut him off. "I already have. But don't worry, I'm not going to destroy what you built. Unlike you, I understand the value of family." I stood up, straightening my tie. "Starting Monday there will be some changes. Michael, you'll be reporting to the board directly. Dad, your retirement package is generous but non-negotiable. Mom, the charity foundation will continue under new management. And me," Jessica's voice was barely a whisper, "your job is safe," I assured her. "But that attitude of yours, that needs to change. Starting with how you treat the service staff." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, showing them the $4,560 bill. With a few taps, I marked it paid, adding a generous tip for the staff. "Consider it my wedding gift," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some guests to attend to." After all, it's not every day the owner of the Wellington gets to celebrate at one of his properties. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Mom, about what you said earlier. You're right, adopted kids do pay their own way. We just sometimes end up paying for everyone else too." The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. Through the thick wood, I could hear the beginning of what would surely be a long family discussion. But I wasn't worried about that anymore. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Back in the ballroom, the celebration continued. Guests were dancing, laughing, completely unaware of the shift in power that had just occurred. I made my way to the bar, ordering a glass of the hotel's finest champagne, my first drink of the night. "Sir," the bartender said, "Mrs. Winters usually approves all premium beverage selections." I smiled, taking the crystal flute. "I don't think that will be necessary anymore." As I sipped my champagne, I watched the party through new eyes. The staff who had always been kind to me, even when my family wasn't, they would all receive raises. The old security guard, who used to slip me coffee during late nights in the mailroom, he'd be getting a promotion. And the family that had never truly accepted me, they were about to learn that real family isn't about blood or adoption papers, it's about respect, dignity, and treating people right. My phone buzzed again, another message from my assistant. "Board meeting scheduled for Monday 9 a.m. All arrangements in place." I typed a quick response. Perfect. Time to reshape the family legacy. The night was still young, and I had a lifetime of changes to set in motion. But for now, I was content to stand here, champagne in hand, watching my family's carefully constructed world reshape itself around the truth they had never wanted to see, that their greatest mistake had become their greatest success story. The morning after Jessica's wedding, I arrived at my penthouse office in the Harrison Tower at precisely 7 a.m. The sun was just rising over the city skyline, casting a golden glow across the walls of awards and acquisitions that my family had never known about. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. 47 missed calls from family members, 23 voicemails, and countless text messages. "Sir," my executive assistant Sarah walked in with a stack of papers. "The Winters family is in the lobby, all of them. They're demanding to see you." I glanced at the security feed on my tablet. There they were, Mom in her designer suit, Dad looking considerably less confident than usual, Michael pacing anxiously, and Jessica still in town despite being scheduled for her honeymoon flight. "Let them wait for 30 minutes, I replied, reviewing the documents Sarah had brought. "Then send them to conference room B, not my office, and have legal ready on standby." "Already done, and Mr. Harrison." Sarah paused at the door. "The board members have all confirmed for tomorrow's meeting, every single one." I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. 28 years of being treated as an outsider had taught me the value of preparation. While they'd been focusing on appearances, I'd been building relationships with every board member, understanding their concerns, and quietly proving my worth. At exactly 7:30 a.m., I watched through the security feed as my family was escorted to conference room B. Mom tried to argue with the security guard about the location, but for once, her social status meant nothing. In this building, only my word carried weight. I took the private elevator down, straightening my tie. The conference room door opened silently, and 4 heads snapped up to look at me. "Good morning," I said calmly, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I assume you've had time to review the documents I provided last night." "This is ridiculous," Michael burst out. "You can't just take over the company." "Actually, I can, and I did, legally and properly." I opened my laptop, turning it to show them the screen. "Every share purchase, every acquisition, all done by the book. Your own legal team can verify it." "James," Mom's voice had taken on that patronizing tone she'd used throughout my childhood. "Sweetheart, we gave you everything, a home, an education, opportunities." "No," I cut her off firmly. "You gave me a roof and reminded me daily that I should be grateful for it. The education, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school because you refused to pay for it like you did for Michael and Jessica. The opportunities, you put me in the mailroom to humble me." Dad leaned forward, his business face on. "Son, let's discuss this reasonably. What do you want? Money? A better position in the company? We can arrange that. What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to understand exactly what happens next." I pressed a button, and the room's screens lit up with financial projections. "Winters Industries has been underperforming for years. Your focus on maintaining social status has led to missed opportunities and inefficient operations. That changes now." I pulled out 4 folders, sliding them across the table. "These are your new contracts. Dad, you'll transition to an advisory role with no direct operational control. Michael, you remain CFO, but with oversight from the board. Mom, the charity foundation will be restructured under professional management. Jessica, you can keep your position in marketing, but you'll report to the new director. And if we refuse," Jessica's voice trembled slightly, "then you resign, effective immediately, with standard severance packages." I met each of their eyes. "This isn't revenge, it's business. The company needs to change to survive." "You planned this," Michael accused. "All these years, pretending to be the humble mailroom worker." "I never pretended anything," I corrected him. "You all just chose to see what you wanted to see. A charity case, an obligation, never a threat to your comfortable world." I stood up, buttoning my jacket. "You have until 5 p.m. today to sign the contracts. After that, the offers expire, and we move to less pleasant alternatives. The board won't stand for this." Dad tried one last time. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. They've all confirmed their attendance." I smiled slightly. "Unlike you, I've spent years getting to know them, understanding their concerns, earning their trust. They're quite excited about the new direction for the company." Mom's face had gone pale. "The charity gala next week, the governor's dinner, will all proceed as planned," I assured her, "though you might find the guest list slightly altered. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." As I reached the door, Jessica spoke up. "Why now? Why at my wedding?" I turned back. "You know, at every family event for the past 28 years, you found ways to remind me that I didn't belong. The separate tables, the forgotten invitations, the constant reminders that I wasn't real family. Last night, you finally pushed too far." "The bill," she whispered. "Exactly. You thought you could humiliate me one last time. Instead, you gave me the perfect moment to show you who I really am." I opened the door. "Sarah will see you out when you're done reviewing the contracts." Back in my office, I watched on the security feed as they sat there, shell-shocked, staring at the contracts. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, the financial press is starting to pick up on the ownership changes. Would you like me to schedule some interviews?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let's wait until after tomorrow's board meeting. And Sarah, cancel my evening appointments. I think it's time I paid a visit to St. Mary's Hospital." "The orphanage?" she asked. "Yes, I think they could use a new wing, something state-of-the-art, with proper funding for education and job training." I looked out over the city, my city now, In many ways, no child should have to prove their worth to be treated like family. By 4:45 p.m., all 4 contracts were signed and delivered to my office, not out of love or respect, but out of recognition of the new reality. The mighty Winters family had finally met someone more powerful than them. The child they'd thought would never amount to anything. As I prepared for the board meeting the next day, I couldn't help but think about that note left with me at the hospital. Please give him a better life. Whoever wrote it probably never imagined that I would end up giving myself that better life, and in the process, teaching my adoptive family the true meaning of success. The board meeting room fell silent as I concluded my presentation. 20 of the most powerful business leaders in the city sat around the mahogany table, their expressions a mix of approval and amazement. Behind me, the digital screens displayed the ambitious 5-year plan I'd developed for Winters Industries, soon to be rebranded as Harrison Global. The numbers are impressive. Gerald Matthews, our longest-serving board member, spoke first. But what strikes me most, James, is how long you've been preparing for this. Those efficiency proposals you sent me 3 years ago, I nodded, were part of a larger strategy. Every suggestion, every casual conversation about company direction, I was building a blueprint while delivering your mail. And your family? Patricia Chen, head of the audit committee, gestured to where my parents and siblings sat at the far end of the table, uncharacteristically quiet. How do they feel about these changes? They've signed their new contracts, I replied smoothly. They understand that this transition is necessary for the company's survival and growth. Dad flinched at my words, the same ones he'd used countless times to justify keeping me out of leadership positions. Michael stared at his hands, while Mom and Jessica seemed fascinated by their tablets. Your proposed expansion into sustainable technology, another board member leaned forward, it's ambitious. Are you sure we have the infrastructure? I pressed a button on my remote, bringing up a new set of slides. Harrison Enterprises has been developing green tech solutions for the past 5 years. We're not starting from scratch, we're merging proven success with established resources. The presentation continued for another hour. I outlined plans for international expansion, strategic acquisitions, and a complete modernization of our corporate culture. By the time I finished, there wasn't a doubtful face in the room. All those in favor of approving the new direction under James Harrison's leadership. Gerald called for the vote, hands raised around the table. My family, realizing resistance was futile, slowly raised theirs too. It was unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Harrison. Gerald stood to shake my hand. Or should I say, Mr. CEO. As the board members filed out, offering congratulations and discussing future meetings, my family remained seated. I could see the questions in their eyes, the struggle to reconcile the mailroom worker they'd dismissed with the businessman who'd just commanded a boardroom. The company car service will take you home, I told them, gathering my materials. HR will email your new schedules and reporting structures by end of day. James' dad's voice was rough. Son, I need to say something. I paused, turning to face him. For the first time in my life, I saw something close to respect in his eyes. You've built something remarkable, he said slowly. Not just Harrison Enterprises, but everything. You did it all without our help. Without our name. I did it despite your name, I corrected him. Every time you told me I wasn't good enough, I worked harder. Every door you closed, I built my own entrance. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. We were wrong about you, so terribly wrong. Yes, you were, I agreed. But this isn't about proving you wrong anymore. It's about building something meaningful. I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline where 3 of my buildings now stood. Tomorrow I'm announcing a new charitable foundation, the Second Chance Initiative, providing education and opportunities for adopted children and foster kids, starting with a new wing at St. Mary's Hospital. Where they found you, Jessica whispered, where my real life began, I corrected her. You know, all those years of making me sit at separate tables, reminding me I wasn't real family. You actually gave me a gift. You taught me that true worth isn't about whose name you carry, or which table you sit at. It's about what you build, who you help, and how you treat others. Michael stood up, straightening his tie nervously. What happens now? Now. I picked up my tablet, checking the time. Now you all go home and read your new contracts carefully. Tomorrow you start proving that you deserve the positions you've kept. And maybe, if you learn to see people for their true worth, rather than their background, you'll understand why I had to do this. And the family? Mom asked quietly. I turned to face them one last time. That's up to you. I don't need your approval anymore, but I'm willing to build a new kind of relationship. One based on respect, not obligation. Think about it. As they left the boardroom, I sent a quick message to Sarah. Schedule the press conference for tomorrow. It's time to tell our story. The next morning, as I prepared to face the media, I thought about that baby left on the hospital steps. The note asking for a better life had been answered, just not in the way anyone expected. Sometimes I realized, the greatest family legacy isn't the one you're born into or adopted into, it's the one you build yourself. 1 year after taking control of Winters Industries, now Harrison Global, I stood in front of St. Mary's Hospital, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on the new Second Chance Children's Wing. The morning sun glinted off the modern glass facade, illuminating the words, "Every child deserves a chance," etched above the entrance. Mr. Harrison, Sister Marie, the elderly nun who had found me on the hospital steps 29 years ago, touched my arm. The children are ready for the tour. Inside, 20 adopted and foster children waited in the new recreation room, their eyes wide with wonder at the state-of-the-art facilities. Each of them had been selected for our mentorship program, which provided education, career guidance, and future job opportunities. Who here thinks they can't succeed because they're adopted? I asked the group. Several small hands raised hesitantly. Let me tell you a story about a baby left right outside this hospital. As I shared my journey, I noticed movement at the back of the room. My family had arrived for the facility's official opening ceremony. They stood quietly, listening to my story with new understanding in their eyes. Over the past year, our relationships had slowly begun to heal, not through grand gestures, but through small changes in behavior and perspective. Michael now actively mentored young professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Jessica had transformed the marketing department to focus on social responsibility. Mom channeled her social influence into fundraising for adoption causes, while Dad advised several youth education initiatives. Success isn't about where you come from, I concluded, meeting each child's gaze. It's about where you choose to go, and who you choose to become. After the tour, I found myself back at the hospital steps where my life began. Sister Marie joined me, holding a familiar yellowed note in her trembling hands. I kept it all these years, she said, passing me the paper that had been left with me as a baby. I knew you'd come back someday, though I never imagined like this. I carefully unfolded the note I'd read countless times in hospital records. Please give him a better life. For the first time, I smiled at those words without bitterness. We're gathering for dinner, Mom's voice came from behind me. The whole family, would you join us? I turned to see my family standing together, not the perfect portrait they'd once insisted on presenting to the world, but something more real, more honest. Same table, I asked, with a slight smile. Same table, Dad confirmed. It's where you always belonged. Later that evening, sitting at the family dinner table, I watched as my relatives interacted with each other differently than before. The pretense was gone, replaced by genuine conversation. Even the staff were treated with new respect. Amazing what can change when people realize the mailroom worker they once dismissed now signs their checks. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Forbes article is live. Harrison Global, how an adopted male clerk built a billion-dollar empire and changed corporate culture. I put the phone away without reading it. The empire, the money, the power, they weren't the real victory. The real win was sitting here, at a table that no longer had separate sections, with a family that had finally learned that worth isn't determined by birth or adoption papers. To new beginnings, I raised my glass, looking around at the faces of my family, not perfect, not entirely healed, but trying. And sometimes that's enough. Sister Marie's words from earlier echoed in my mind. Sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. She wasn't just talking about the new hospital wing. She meant the lessons my journey had taught us all, about family worth, and the power of second chances. The note that started my life now hangs framed in my office. Please give him a better life. Below it I'd added my own message. He built one instead. The end.